I'll introduce our members of the panel first to everybody. We have Bob Banks from Vodafone UK, Peter Stoker from UTAC Millbrook, and there on the end is Andy Chappell from Commsignia. First of all, we talked a bit on the slides there about trying to use, we've used a CAM testbed, we've been at UTAC and at Mira in this project. Can the panel explain to people why it's a benefit to test services like this on a CAM testbed?
Well, if I can maybe start from our perspective. So we are one of the controlled environments in CAM testbed UK, along with Hariba Mira, who are the other partner in the project. The whole idea really is to look at new technologies, new techniques, new ways of analysing things, first in a controlled way before we go near the public space. The whole ethos really is just got to fail in private, make the mistakes, make the iterations, make sure everything's ready to go before launching out in public. I think particularly with some of the V2X services and technologies, we're very mindful that actually there's vehicles out there today running around the streets that have this fitted. So if you were to sort of set up experiments on motorways, for example, like dropping in a 20 miles an hour speed limit on lane 4, then you have the potential to inconvenience a lot of people and cause a lot of upset. So the whole idea of doing this sort of experimentation in a closed environment is to make sure you do it in the right way before you go anywhere else.
Yeah, okay. I'd probably add to that as well. Some of the use cases for V2X work about safety. So it's about vulnerable road users. And you kind of, in testing, you have to take this right up to the limit and possibly beyond the limit. So actually, damaging people in testing isn't really seen as a good idea. So doing that in private with soft cars, soft targets is, obviously the only way to do it.
Yeah, and from the Vodafone perspective, we're obviously keen to take advantage of this closed sort of controlled environment as well, to make sure that our aspects of this end-to-end capability are also understood, and we can test those, and we can bring in the other players to a certain extent, like the pedestrians who have the handsets, etc., be it with a Vodafone subscription or whoever, and make sure that they are all part of this overall capability of making the road network safer, more efficient and more effective for all road users. So again, it's a real good added benefit for Vodafone as well.
Okay, thanks. One of the things we talked about on the slides there was around different standards, no consensus, no common view of things. And I'm interested to know from the panel, how do you view the capability of V2X in the UK compared with, for example, Europe?
Do you want me to take that one? Okay, so I think from a technology point of view, we're pretty well advanced. We've got some great testing facilities now, both off-road and on-road with some of the CAM UK test beds. In terms of taking that to the next level and actually deploying that at scale and reaping the benefits, then perhaps we're a little bit behind at the moment. But we've got the capability to actually pick that up and come back. So if we look at China, for example, we know that I think there are 19 different models of car out there now in China with V2X enabled. If we look at North America, Ford have announced models, have got models out there and announced more coming. And a lot of cities in the US are actually getting benefits from V2X now. They kind of recognize that they need to take some initial benefits before they can get wider benefits. So in places like Detroit, they've got priority for serialized intersections which give priority to certain vehicles. And they've given that to snowplows to allow them to clear the roads more quickly. Similar thing in Atlanta, where they've given priority to express buses that are behind schedule. And they reckon it only takes a small change for about 3 traffic lights to get the buses back on schedule. And they're talking about being able to get trucks and lorries out of the city as fast as possible with the same sort of technology. So they're quite advanced in actually taking benefits from this. And similarly, in a lot of European cities, if you look at the Netherlands and talking traffic, they've gone a long way down the implementation route. So the UK is a little bit behind, but I think with some of the things that Vodafone are doing, we've kind of got the basics there to really push on and implement this at scale.
I suppose that leads on to hopefully saying something about what Vodafone are doing. So we're very keen to move away from this sort of demonstration, sort of project type approach. There's been a lot of activities in the past around, and we're now very keen to move into the wide area deployment of this, and also the scalability of this. Okay, I've run out of battery, have I? The scalability of this. So Vodafone are taking a bold step and will be deploying a UK nationwide capability here very shortly. Because of our European footprint, we will also be looking to extend that to other European countries as well, where we have local markets. We have partner markets where we have commercial agreements with other MNOs that we don't hold any investment in. Again, so we can start to attack this scalable mass rollout from the Vodafone perspective, and hopefully that will start to stimulate and get further engagement with some of the other stakeholders that perhaps ultimately are looking for somebody to take a bit of a lead here and put that stake in the ground and get things moving. So hopefully we can enable that to happen, and because the UK is well positioned to be the first to get this, then hopefully that will help maintain the UK's position in this space as a whole.
Yeah, I think one of the useful advantages that we have as a group of test beds is we do move from a very controlled space to a semi-controlled to a public space. Mm-hmm. And each of the test beds has its own little piece of almost what you would call minimum viable infrastructure, where you can take out things on multi-lane highways, highly signalised junctions, public space. So there's no shortage of environments that people can be informed as to how they can test, how they can develop, and what sort of economic impact it might be to either dig the roads up or put more infrastructure in. And I think importantly as well, we are technology agnostic. We are aware that there is a lot of discussion and debate, a lot of positions on different types of technology, but the key message behind it all is actually the message itself. The key message is the message. And the sort of things that we had generated through the Commsignia lead in all of this is a standard message was projected to different devices using different technologies. That's the important thing, is the message is done, received and acted upon.
Okay. We talked about, I mentioned on the slides that V2X services could be used now. You know, it's not entirely dependent on having, you know, hundreds of CAN vehicles out there for this to work. Does the panel have a view on what those first services might look like as they begin to roll out?
Okay, I'll kick off on that one. I think it's my turn. So I think very much in the safety space here. So a key aspect of V2X is all about making the road network safer for all participants and users. So from a Vodafone perspective and through this project, we've very much been looking at how we can improve the safety for road users. So a lot of good can be done through the use of existing cellular networks and the existing handsets, and that's something that we've made great use of. All of those legacy vehicles currently out there, chances are every single one will have a handset in it because somebody will bring a handset into that. So there are ways here through updating, making handset applications capable of becoming V2X enabled to allow vehicles ultimately through those handsets, through the Android Auto, Apple CarPlay integration into infotainment systems. This can start to generate quite a large capability here, together with the handsets in people's hands, doing pedestrians, doing the cyclists, doing the horse riders. It's all part of a system that can really start to take off if we can get the traction, and hopefully we can start to get the traction having deployed something out there as a platform on which these things can work.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right that safety is going to drive this. But there are so many different V2X use cases that it's not clear which ones will come first. There's a group that most people are kind of agree on, but then different places will have different use cases that need. So probably it will see different things happening in different parts of the country. So for example, in London, with lots of micromobility, lots of bikes, then some of the vulnerable road user use cases might be really useful. We heard earlier somebody saying that they cycle in London, which is a terrifying prospect if you're a cyclist and you've got a lorry turning left. So that would be a use case that would work pretty well in London. If you look on the national highways, stopped vehicle detection, being able to highlight to other users that a lane's blocked dynamically, which is the key to V2X, that would also be a really useful use case. And I guess that's more useful when the road isn't as busy as, when it isn't at its busiest. If there's a stopped vehicle in lane 2, you really want to know about it. With V2X, you can get that into cars very quickly. And there are other ones you could talk about. Parking, being able to direct people to where there's parking available, and also for road operators to kind of direct traffic a little bit. If you're travelling up the M6, then it'd be nice to be able to have real-time information about, is the M6 toll quicker and by how much than travelling up the main M6? And you can make an informed choice. And that will have knock-on impacts on the economy by reducing traffic time. I think we talked about the emergency brake assist. So I'll try and explain this without using some of the V2X terminology, because there's loads of that. But green waves going through traffic lights, if you could set up a green wave so cars all go through without having to brake. And when you do the calculations on the energy used by a lorry to accelerate 40 tons from 0 up to 20 or 30 miles an hour, if you can reduce that, you reduce their fuel costs, but you also reduce their emissions as well. So there's a great deal of different use cases. Probably they'll be in different parts of the country at different times and with different vehicles. But as you update the vehicles, you can learn and implement more and more of these use cases.
Yeah, I think there's value obviously in the two-way side of it as well. It's not just vehicles taking things from what's going on around them, it's them reporting their data back, and that's where it kind of helps as well. I mean, yes, there's, what is it, I think David Wong had helped me, there's 39 million registered vehicles in the UK, something like that. That's not a bad market to go at, actually. Plus all the other users, the pedestrians, the cyclists and everything else. But I think there's also additional value in where things are, where they're going, what they're doing, without being intrusive in that sort of way, but just to understand and get information back to road authorities as to what's going on where.
Okay. Does the panel have a view on what needs to be done now then in order to get V2X out there so we can start to reap some of these benefits?
I guess it comes down to it's the cooperation now that's needed. It's cooperative ITS, and it needs cooperation from OEMs. It needs cooperation from road operators. We've got the likes of Vodafone, Nokia that we did this particular project with, and it's about putting that ecosystem together in a deployable, scalable way that is usable. So it might start by looking at fleet operators, for example. It could be the white van delivery drivers, getting information to them about speed limits, parking information, parking restrictions, making their routes more efficient, but also making sure that they obey the local laws. At the moment, I believe that they kind of accept parking fines as a way of just cost of doing business, but trying to help them avoid that. So I think it's about finding those ways of scaling up, and also mixing and matching some of the technology. So the cellular V2X that's run over things like the Vodafone network is useful for about 90% of the use cases, but there are some use cases that we think maybe we need the roadside units to be placed as well. And it's about having a consistent architecture that can mix and match those technologies and put the roadside units in locations where they're needed, but you've got the national coverage with Vodafone as well. So now it's really about getting everybody to work together, and that means to a certain extent breaking down some of the traditional competitive barriers. So one of the things we did on this project is, although Commsignia produced roadside units, we actually used the Coda roadside units at UTAC and Myra for this purpose. And we need to make sure that it doesn't matter which roadside unit you've got, you can deliver those through the messages through anything, whether it's Vodafone, whether it's Coda, whether it's Commsignia units. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
I think for me, what's next is essentially saying to people, do you know what this stuff's all about? There's so many slides, reports, presentations, so much money has been invested in this sort of area within the EU, within the US and everywhere else, but still in the UK, there's nowhere where you can say, so what is it? Where can I see it? Can it work? How do we do this? How do you get a message to that roadworks, and how do you put it in for this time period? I think what we set up at the CAM Testbed UK installations at UTAC and also at Myra is a place where people can come and gather together and understand what this is. How does it work? What do I need to do to my infrastructure? How much is it going to cost? How many units do I need per kilometre? Do I need fibre? Do I need cell towers? Do I need radio? Everything else. It's never really been in one place in such a controlled space that you can look at this. Yeah, there was some work done on the A2N2 some time ago, but that's a piece of public road that's really difficult to access. So having somewhere where operators, investors, traffic authorities, vehicle makers, and so on can come together and say, how does this all work? I think the next stage is about having that demonstration, that education, that people say, I'm really interested in that. I can see where that starts to make sense. So for me, that's the important thing, is the awareness, the education.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with both of those. Bringing those two together, let's make use of what we've delivered as part of the project. Education is key to enable the different players, stakeholders in the ecosystem to really get to grips with this. As Peter said, lots of slideware out there, lots of demos that have been and come and gone to a certain extent. This is something that people can come and get hands dirty with. They can come back again and try it. They can go away, think about it, come back again. So that there's the engagement of the stakeholders and the ecosystem players is really there now. I mentioned earlier in terms of from the legacy vehicle perspective, we've got the likes of cellular handsets, which can bring a lot of this capability into that sector of the market. I think going forward, we're obviously keen to get the OEMs to start embedding these ITS messages capability into the vehicles that are coming off the production line. Appreciate at the moment the automotive industry is not in an ideal place. They've got a lot of pressures coming from a lot of different angles. But I think the sooner we can get vehicles coming off the production line with the ITS capability in them, then the sooner we can start to sort of build the whole ecosystem, not just with the legacy vehicles, but with the new vehicles. So I think key is the ecosystem coming together. The other key is to make use of what we've now got at UTAC and Myra to sort of push that forward, do the education.
Okay, thanks. I've got one final question for the panel. The things we talked about today in terms of V2X services, how are they different from some of the things that are out there today, like, for example, Waze?
Well, Andy can do that one.
So actually, it's a good question, because if you look at a road operator, the first question, if I want to put messages out there, how do I deliver them to users? And Waze and Google Maps are kind of the obvious way of thinking about that. But if you look at Waze, that's got some really great information about roadworks, about accidents, but it's crowdsourced. And the question is, how far can you trust that? Whereas with the V2X messaging standards and the security built into that, that's more about trust. The messages come through from road operators, trusted sources, verified, so that you can actually trust that information. Particularly if you're talking about regulatory speed limits, traffic information, you really want to be able to trust that information. Waze is a great service, but it's limited in terms of where it gets its data from.
Yeah, so again, just building on what Andy said, it's inference of information that the likes of Waze gets from how mobile handsets, etc., devices are moving around. With ITS, you're getting definitive messages coming out of the road users. You're getting definitive information, authoritative information coming into the vehicle from the likes of road operators that are responsible for the efficient, effective running of that road network there. So it is that definitiveness, the trust that is ultimately there within the ITS system that really sets this apart from the likes of Waze. And the other thing to perhaps also mention is with the newer cellular technologies, we've got the opportunity to embed computing capability much closer to the road users, and hence we can start to reduce latency problems, etc., latency and jitter aspects. And ultimately we can take potentially more data off the road. So as part of this project, we're effectively taking CAM messages, and apologies, maybe going into a little bit of detail now, messages that a vehicle puts out either every 1 second as a minimum or up to 10 times a second. We're taking that level of information from vehicles over the cellular network into this edge computing capability. If all of that data had to then ultimately go back across the cellular network and out to third-party applications sitting out there on the internet, then the scale of the network we need to support that would be phenomenal, and the cost associated with it. So we can start to do things much more efficient and effective in the network through the use of these newer cellular technologies like edge computing and stuff like that. So again, there's different things within the architecture that enable us to do things in a more efficient and effective way.
Okay.
And I'm an independent and impartial test bed. So we'd be happy to look at anything, and obviously there are other traffic platforms available. So the key thing, I think, again, is the message. It's a space where people can come and trial stuff, fail, fall over, try again, and then deploy. That's the key thing.
Can I just make one last comment? So just perhaps a clarity comment or confirmation comment. The system that Vodafone has developed is not reliant upon having a Vodafone data subscription. So it is a capability that can also interwork with any MNO subscription. So it's a service platform. If you use a different MNO, you perhaps lose a little bit of the edge compute capability and the lower latency and jitter. But it is a services platform that works for any mobile network operator subscription. That data from that device, be it car, handset or whatever, ultimately can come back to the Vodafone V2X platform, actually get that information in and also get served the information back out as well. So just for clarity, it's not a bespoke Vodafone opportunity or product here. It's an MNO industry product ultimately. It's just that perhaps Vodafone have taken the step forward here.
Yeah,
The
thanks
other
very
thing
much for that.
perhaps we should say is that as we scale this out, there'll be opportunities for additional information and safety information coming out of the system. So an example would be if we know that there is a particular spot on the road that is always subject to heavy braking, then we can inform the road operators and they can look at maybe the road design to avoid accidents rather than sort of react to accidents. And there's all sorts of data we can get out of the system to do road surveys before new designs are put in place of the road. So you can actually see how traffic generically flows around without digging up your roads to put loop sensors in or putting in Bluetooth or Wi-Fi sensors that have been done in the past.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. We're almost out of time now. It just remains for me to thank our panel of experts. If you could perhaps all show your appreciation for their illuminating answers.